After his country's defeat, the emperor is held captive by the rival country's crown prince, with the looming threat of slavery. Luo Ange tries to jump off the balcony, but his plan was thwarted by the rival crown prince who wanted him to see him wearing a red wedding gown. It is chaos in the imperial capital. The attack was so unexpected that the servants and nobles alike did not have time to flee. The Yi army has come to conquer their lands. Knowing that his capture is imminent, the emperor stays calmly in the imperial study, even telling his servants to leave before the enemy soldiers break in. The Ange serving him cried in guilt and heartbreak at the thought of leaving their crown prince behind. The emperor has been so kind and merciful to them that many of them decide to stay with him until the end. The emperor is touched by the Yumich's words, but before he could utter a reply, a young man breaks in and announces that the enemy has reached the noon gate. Strangely, they have yet to make a move in spite of them arriving an hour ago. The emperor can only wonder what it is that they are waiting for. The young man tells the crown prince that the soldiers are led by the crown prince of the Yi state, and it was him who ordered the soldiers to remain on standby. The crown prince of the Yi state told the young man that he will not harm the people, but his mercy is not for free. The young man hesitates to deliver the message, but the crown prince urges him. The young man bowed lowly as he uttered the words that would seal his prince's fate. The crown prince of Yi state wants their emperor to open the gate himself and welcome the enemy prince Don in a red wedding dress and his face covered in makeup. Could it be that the crown prince of Yi must want to embarrass this country's prince? If he does not comply, the crown prince of the Yi state will raid their city and mercilessly end the lives of everyone, be it slave, servants, or royalty. So if the crown prince of Yi handles rejection very well, stunned at the odd request, the emperor grits his teeth in anger. Mustering his resolve, he grabs a white cloth out of nowhere and wraps it around his head. He vows to protect his country and die if he has to. This crown prince is full of spirit. He, Luo Ange, shall lay his life down. If the enemy prince wants to see him in red, then he shall see him smeared with blood. He orders the eunuch to have a carriage prepared for him, and he shall ride to the city gate. I really like his spirit. At the gate, 1,000 enemy soldiers are waiting. Their red flags sway proudly in the wind. At the forefront is a majestically clad man atop a brown horse. His obvious excitement is plain to see on his face. As Luo Ange steps on the balcony to address the enemy, the crown prince of Yi state lights up and his lips part in a wide smile. Luo Ange addressed the crown prince of Yi state by his name Muqi. He's appalled that Muqi is attacking his country when he has not done anything to provoke him. Luo Ange angrily asks him why he would go to such an extent only to humiliate him. Muqi grins at him and asks why he is dressed in mourning clothes instead of the wedding dress he requested. In ancient China, they wear white to mourn, and red when getting married. Angered at the other prince's flippant response, Luo Ange fists his hands and warns the other to be careful of what he wishes for. Luo Ange raised on foot on the balcony's edge, threatening to jump. His blood will be on the enemy's hands. Muqi screams at him to stop. He threatens that if Luo Ange dies, he will make sure that no one in the city survives. If he has any care for the lives of his people, he shall refrain from jumping. The threat made Luo Ange realize that he was left without a choice. He screams at Muqi for being a heartless, malicious being and threatens that others should watch his back. As if pacifying a child who is simply having a tantrum, Muqi tells him that if he is done with his tirade, he should come down. The balcony is chilly and Luo Ange might catch a cold standing there for so long. Luo Ange fires back that it is Muqi who is unhinged. I agree with him. If you just want to woo someone, conquering a country is kind of overkill. Muqi tells him that if he does not wish to come down, then he shall go up to fetch him. Fear crawls up Luo Ange's spine at hearing this threat. The fear made him take a step back. Muqi sees his hesitation, and he steps on his horse and jumps up high in the air until he lands on the balcony, about 5 stories above him. Ancient Chinese people can fly. Don't ask me how. They just can. Flustered by the other prince's ability of defying gravity and anything physics, Luo Ange can only point his finger at Muqi. Muqi wasted no time and grabbed Luo Ange by the waist. He then lifts him up bridal style to the other's horror and jumps off the balcony. Fearing for his life, Luo Ange grabs tightly to Muqi. Muqi takes this chance to tease Ange for being afraid when only minutes ago he was threatening to jump off the balcony for his country's sake. Realizing that they have safely landed, Luo Ange looks up and the embarrassment for being in arms of the enemy petrifies him. He quickly jumps off Muqi. Once he is at a safe distance, he faces him and makes a deal. He and his country will surrender and shall allow the enemy soldiers to enter the city. Muki finds his attempts to take control amusing. He claims that Ange's life is his and the emperor is not in a position to propose any deals. Wetishly, Muki gets close to Ange's face and places his thumb on his chin. On a whim, he tells Ange that he shall listen to what the emperor wants to say. Being a benevolent sovereign, Ange wants him to promise to not hurt the civilians and the members of the royal family. Muki finds the emperor's insinuation offensive. The emperor doesn't hide that he sees Muki as a merciless man who enjoys the thrill of conquering lands and slaughtering innocent people. Muki grabs the emperor's waist and unceremoniously lifts him up on his shoulders like a bag of rice. Ange can only struggle and lush uncontrollably when Muki playfully slaps his bottom. Save the spanking for the wedding night. Muki promises to keep everyone safe as long as the emperor follows his commands, still struggling from the embarrassing position he is in. Ange screams at Muki to let him go, but the other nonchalantly walks towards the gate like it was any other Sunday afternoon. It is a bright afternoon. The birds chirp outside as Luo Ange enters a room that he used to be master of. Two men are waiting for him. One of them sits on a chair while the other stands beside him. The one standing points his finger at Luo Ange and tells him that he should show respect to the new ruler of the land as he no longer holds power here. With his country defeated, his place is that of a lowly servant. That's just mean. He was emperor as of yesterday. Born of nobility, Luo Ange cannot bear to kowtow even when he's fully aware of his situation. Muki kindly smiles at him and tells him that he does not need to bow if he does not want to. Ange does not appreciate this kind gesture. The other must be faking it. He does not wish to accept pity, so he kneels down, knowing that his action will have an effect on his people. He cannot bear for them to suffer due to stubbornness on his part. For the sake of his people, he shall kneel. He cannot put into words what he feels and cries on the spot. The man who told him to kneel looks at him in shock and pity. Muki clenches his fist and purposefully walks towards Ange. He pats his head in an attempt to stop the former emperor's tears. He wipes the tears with his finger and tells him that the emperor cries like a pitiful kitten. Ange swats his hand and apologizes for his sudden burst of emotion. Muki smiles at him sinisterly and asks him how he feels. Ange is upset that Muki dares to call him by his pet name. Ange reports the current state of his country. He reports that this year's tribute mission is too much for his people. His state has been poor for many years now and lacks resources. After a recent war, his people can only get by to eat and has yet to recover. Muki generously tells him that he shall accept 50%. Surprised that he does not need to grovel to plead on behalf of his people, Ange looks at him in awe. But his hopes are dashed when Muki tells him that he wants something in return. Fearing what the other man wants, sweat runs down Ange's temple. Muki places his hand on the back of Ange's neck, drawing him closer. There is someone he wants from Yunmo and wants Ange to grant his wish. Thinking that it must be a dainty woman, Ange asks who it is. Without hesitation, Muki tells him that it is he, Luo Ange, that he wants. He shall take the former emperor as a pet slave when he returns home to Yi's state. Angered by the audacious request, Ange leans back while spouting profanities. He might have been defeated, but he cannot allow this man to further humiliate him. Muki grabs hold of his wrists and pins him on the floor. He tells Ange that he does not need to go. The fate of his people lies on his decision. He leans in to whisper that whether they suffer or not is up to Ange. Looming over the former emperor, Muki tells Ange of his options. Ange thinks of his people. Try and get Muki to change his mind. He tells him that he is forgetful and dumb and would not be a good addition to Muki's household. He is about to tell him that there will be many beautiful women who will be willing to serve the crown prince, but is cut off when the prince places his thumb on Ange's chin. The crown prince tells him that Ange is indeed forgetful. If he had a good memory, he would have remembered what happened, hinting at some great event that was a turning point in their lives. Their lives must have been intertwined. In a flashback, two boys stood face to face in a clearing. They are younger versions of Muki and Ange. Muki hands over a treasured dice to Ange. Was he a prolific gambler? He promised to return to Ange in a year's time. It's a dice with a red bean inside. It's a token of love. Once we'll carve the name of their lover in the red bean and put it inside a jade dice. If the lover accepts, they will be together forever. Ange does not know what he did that angered Muki. Muki waves him off, saying that it is nothing of importance. It is because Ange does not care and so he won't remember. He seems to have loved Ange before, so what happened? Turning his back on the former emperor, He gives an ultimatum that the only one he wants in Yunle is the emperor himself. If he defies him, his people will suffer as they will have to work hard to pay the tribute mission in full. Angered at being backed in a corner, Ange can only grit his teeth, finally making a decision. Ange relaxes his hands that were clenched tightly. He agrees to Muqi's demands and asks who will govern Yunle with him away. Muqi reminds him that Ange has a younger brother who can rule in his place. Muqi will have his father bestow the honor of vassal to Ange's little brother. With their country conquered, the people of Yunli are now people of Yi State. Muqi tells Ange to not worry. As long as he follows Muqi's requests, the people of Yunli will be treated well. Ange has no words. He can only sit quietly while this man uses his country to blackmail him. Ange shakes his head in defiance and is repulsed by the other's touch. Offended at the other's attitude, Muqi grabs Ange and reminds him of his place. Ange freezes in fear, which delights Muqi. He leans down to sniff the other's hair. He's turning into a creep. Luo Ange recites a mantra in his head to stay still and not fight it. Having the former emperor close, Muqi tells him to have a good rest for tomorrow. He shall take him to his home in Yi State. The 9th year of the Qingli dynasty marks the year when the Yi army conquered Yunle and returned home triumphantly. As collateral damage, they brought with them the former emperor of Yunle. Ange can't help but worry for his brother's well-being. Someone who is young and timid will be bullied by ambassadors from the Yi State. The role of vassal is a big responsibility for someone so young. As if attempting to make him comfortable, Muqi offers him tea knowing that Ange is not used to traveling. Petulantly, Ange turns away and refuses his kind offer. Muqi tilts Ange's head towards him, pinching his cheeks. Thinking that the other is only being playful, Muqi calls Ange Xiao Xiaojiang and tells him to stop kidding. Ange is dead serious. As a monarch, he has no time for jokes. Muqi recites Ange's name, followed by his title. Luo Ange, Zi Xiaoheng. He asks if he remembered Ange's name correctly. Ange commends him that his memory is so good that you would remember the name of the ruler of a small country. Muqi tells him that the name Xiao Xiao is a good name. He tells Ange that there is a saying that includes the word Xiao Xiao. The saying goes, the wedding night should be cherished and every minute is precious. On the translation notes, the Chinese character Xiao Xiao means night, and Chun Xiao is wedding night. Muqi finds this as an opportunity to create a nickname for him. He proposes to call him Xiao Xiao moving forward. Already making nicknames, this guy is coming at it hard. The road is rocky and bumpy. One of the wheels rolls over a stone, causing the carriage to topple a little to the side. The sudden shake of the carriage made Ange lose his balance and fall down on Muqi's lap. Not used to traveling, the bumpy road is making Ange dizzy. No matter how much he holds it in, he cannot fight against the bile that gushes out of his mouth and projectiles rainbows on Muqi's clothes. Chinese censorship is so hardcore, they won't even allow images of vomiting on comics. Understandably, Muqi is upset that Ange vomited on him. However, instead of being mad at him, he holds Ange by the waist and teasingly asks him if the new nickname Xiao Xiao makes him sick. Oh, he's nice and has a sense of humor. I'm starting to like him. Worried that he might have made the other man mad, Ange swears that he did not mean to vomit all over him. Another round of bile threatens to come out of his throat, but Ange forces them back down. Haltingly uttering his apologies, Muqi orders the driver to stop. His attendant quickly comes to their aid and asks what he can do for his crown prince. Ange is worried that he got Muqi so mad that he would send him back to Yun State. It is in his favor, but he worries about what will become of his people. Surprisingly, Muqi only lets out a sigh and asks the attendant to bring them a towel and 2 sets of clean garments. The attendant quickly obeyed. Inside the carriage, the two sat in silence. Muqi turns to Ange and rubs his nose. He asks how can Ange get sick when he is sitting comfortably in a carriage. Ange can only think of one reason. It must be because he had to sit there looking at Muqi's face. Muqi might be handsome, but his atrociousness makes him look disgusting in Ange's eyes. That's a little harsh. Muqi playfully pats him on his back, playfully teasing him for being so delicate. Ange fires back that he is not delicate. It's been so long since he went outside his palace. With how long they have to travel and the carriage moving so fast, it is no wonder that he became sick. Muqi playfully humors Ange to his attendant's surprise. The attendant's face shows what we are all thinking. What the hell is going on with these two? He tells him that he might be right and they should punish the driver for making him sick. Muqi grabs the towel the attendant brought him and uses to wipe the remaining vomit around Ange's mouth. Ange swats his hand, telling him that there is no need for him to pretend to be a good guy as is only the two of them. With half his face covered in shadow, Muki reminds him that he is Muki's slave and he must serve him. Muki unties his robes and shows off his muscular body to Ange, inviting him to come closer. That escalated quickly. I literally am sporting a surprised Pikachu face right now. Pika Pika. Scared at the sudden turn of events, Ange asks what Muki is up to and calls him various names. Muki is saddened by the names that Ange has been throwing at him. The former emperor has just called him a rascal, pervert, and rogue. Muki grabs Ange's collar, like a banshee from hell. Ange screams for help while pushing the other off of him. Annoyed by the screams, Muki tells him that he wanted Ange to help him change his clothes. So that's what he meant by serving him. We all jump to the wrong conclusion. We should all evaluate our life's choices. Finally realizing that the other has no intention to molest him, at least not for now, Ange finally calms down. Muki grabs his hand and seductively asks him if there is something else that Ange wants to do with him. He licks Ange's finger while maintaining eye contact. He turned into a creep again. We were right all along. The hairs on Ange's body raises, and he immediately tells Muki that he will change his clothes as long as the other man lets go of him. Muki pats him on the head and commends him for being a good boy. Ange helps Muki change into clean clothes. Ange is aware that Muki can change his clothes by himself, and there's no need to ask Ange for help. Muki wraps his hand on Ange's waist. Startled, Ange asks what it is this time. Muki points out that Ange's hand has been on his chest for a while now and wonders if Ange is feeling him up. He also tells him that he does not mind. His hackles raise. Ange stands up abruptly. Due to the low ceiling, he bumps his head with a loud thud, earning him a bump as big as an egg on his head. His eyes water in pain, and he staggers forward with his eyes closed. He blindingly grabs on anything for support. Of all the things he could grab, his hand clasped around Muki's clothes, effectively undressing him. Blushing furiously, Ange tries to explain that it was not his intention to undress Muki. The other could only laugh as he put his clothes back on. Meanwhile, the soldiers tasked with escorting them can't help but wonder at the odd orders from their crown princess. The prince ordered them to slow down, as they had just won a war. They should return to their country as soon as possible. The other explains that their captive has been sickly, and so they were told to slow down. The two laughs, letting their guard down, knowing that their captive is a spoiled, noble man and not someone to be wary of. After 10 days, they finally arrived in Yi City's capital. Inside the carriage, Muki cares for Ange, who is suffering from motion sickness. He caresses his head and tells him that he will feel better soon. They are about to return to the palace. This is not good news to Ange as he fears what will become of him. From outside the carriage, a soldier announces that they have arrived at the Xuanwu gate and that they must move to a set-in carriage prepared for them. Muki gets off the carriage and offers his hand to Ange. The other can't help but be suspicious of his intentions and asks what Muki wants from him. He worries that Muki would interrogate it to get the secrets of Yunlei. He stubbornly tells Muki that he will not let anyone order him around. Annoyed by his antics, Muki calls him by his full name and tells him that he is not after the secrets of Yunlei. What secrets would he want? He already conquered the country. He pulls at Ange's hand. The former emperor stumbles forward and they were forced to look each other in the eye. Muki does not let go of Ange's wrist and tells him that there is a reason on why Muki asked him to come home with him to Yi State. Ange asks what his status will be and where he will reside. Muki thinks about it for a while and tells him that the dungeon of his eastern palace is empty, and it will be the perfect place to house Yunlei's former emperor. Complaining at the lack of hospitality, Ange can't believe that he will make him live in a dungeon. Muki threatens that if Ange does not obey him, he will surely lock him up in the dungeon with no food. Ange pushes him and angrily points a finger at him. Muki is harsh for not adhering to ethical codes and the law. As a former monarch, Ange demands that he be treated better. Muki grabs his wrist and reminds him that he is now a prisoner. At the reminder, Ange's hope for any future is shattered. He lowers his head in obedience, while Muki turns to his servant who came to greet them. He then invites Ange to follow him to the palace. They enter the hall of the Eastern Palace, and Ange can't help but to compare it to the hall in Yunlei State. This hall is bigger than the one he has at home, and he concludes that the Yi State is a much more powerful country than theirs. He looks at Muki and comments that it is so warm. Muki tells him that he will move with him and his bedroom will be so much warmer. Ange wonders if he will become Muki's personal servant, and he tells Muki that he does not want to live with him. I don't think you have a say on the matter. Muki tells him that where he lives is up to Muki. Now that he is a prisoner, he cannot do as he wishes. Menacingly, he tells Ange that he has a short temper, and it will not do Ange any good if he keeps on contradicting him. He walks towards the desk and pours a cup of water for Ange. He offers it to the former emperor. Ange does not appreciate the offer and swats the glass of water away. Not a good idea. The sound of the cup shattering on the floor resounds in the hall, followed by Muki calling him by his full name. He reminds Ange that he is no longer in Yunle. The other challenges him to go ahead and end him if he so wished. Muki has already taken over his army and slayed many of his soldiers. Another life is of no consequence. Muki grabs him by the shoulder. He's had enough of his attitude. He's been so nice to Ange that he grew a spine and started to rebel. He restrains Ange while the other men struggle. Muki pushes Ange towards the wall, telling him that he would show him what a real rogue would do. He pulls at Ange's robes to Ange's horror and reaches down to touch his stomach. Not understanding what's going on, Ange asks what he wants. Muki wanted no time and kissed Ange on the lips. Scandalized, Ange calls him unhinged for kissing a man. Muki licks his lips and asks him when did he ever tell him that he likes women. He finds Ange's beauty more appealing than any woman. Muki is undeterred and tears at Ange's clothing. In their struggle, a charm made with a dice housing a red bean and tassels falls to the ground. Muki continues his actions and busies himself on Ange's slender neck. Ange struggles futilely beneath him, demanding to be released. He stomps on Muki's foot, which makes the crown prince hiss. Finally having a moment of reprieve, Ange escapes from Muki's grasps and throws himself on the floor, grabbing his discarded clothing and calling Muki a pervert. Something catches Muki's eyes and he walks towards the fallen charm. He picks up the charm and recognition dawns on him. It is the charm he gave Ange years ago. Muki dangles the charm in front of Ange. At the sight of the charm in Muki's hand, Ange angrily charges toward him, demanding that he returns it to him. Like the bully that he is, Muki hides the charm from Ange's reach. Muki remembers that he gave the charm to Ange, promising that he will return to him. The vision of Ange smiling for him, promising to wait for him, is a distant past. In the present, Ange looks at him with disgust. Muki asks Ange why he would bother to take the charm with him. Ange puffed his cheeks, telling him that it is not Muki's business. He demands that Muki release him and return the charm. Muki smiles menacingly and reminds him who gave him the exquisite dice. Ange is baffled by this question. In Ange's memory, the dice was picked out by a nanny to match his clothes. He found the dice to be very pretty and decided to wear it with every outfit. This answer upsets Muki. He can't believe that Ange remembers it differently. He pushes Ange to the floor, throwing the dice at him. Angry at being treated too roughly, Ange shouts at Muki, calling him crazy. Muki tells him that he was right all along. He is right that Ange is heartless. Ange picks up the dice, not understanding what set the other off. Ange shouts at him that Muki is the crazy one. So why would he, Ange, be heartless? Ange slumps on the floor, shaking in anger. Muki calls for a servant who has been hiding in a corner. Muki orders the servant to lock Ange in the dungeon. The servant readily obeyed, while Ange froze in fear. Two servants approached him, dragging him away. Shocked that Muki would actually let him live in the dungeons, Ange angrily accepted his fate and turns his back on him. Suddenly, Muki tells them to wait and takes off his outer robes. He puts his robe on Ange, then tells the servants to take him to the dungeon. How about not sending him off to the dungeons? Muki's gesture confuses Ange, punishing him, then rewarding him with a coat. He angrily grabs at the coat, resolute that he does not need it. Deep in the dungeons, along with the mice and her vermin, Ange cries as he trembles in fear. The dungeon is the scariest place for him. Born with a silver spoon in his mouth, he grew up privileged and fears ghosts, bugs, and dirty things. He'd rather die than sleep in this kind of place. His pity party is interrupted by the sound of merriment. The guards in charge of the dungeons are having a drink. Ange scooted towards them, wanting to have a conversation. He asks the guards what's wrong with their crown prince. Someone must have dropped him when he was a baby that made him moody. One of the guards slams his cup on the table and shouts at Ange for criticizing their crown prince. He threatens to slap him if he continues. Petulantly, Ange believes that he is telling the truth. He watches the two guards enjoy their meal and drinks. Out of boredom and wanting to shatter the guards' perfect image of the crown prince, he tells them that the crown prince is gay. That came out of left field. That has never happened to any other BLs I read. I'll be spewing my drink all over myself like those guards if I was drinking something when I read that line. The guard's reaction is a masterpiece. He draws his word for the slander he heard. The other guard tries to calm him down and reminds him that the crown prince will not forgive them if something happens to this prisoner. The guard tries to get his hands on Ange, while the other does his best to restrain him. Not minding the chaos he caused, Ange goes back to thinking about his own predicament. He does not understand why the crown prince will be mad because of the charm. However, he would be fine if it would make Muki stay away from him. He lets out a sigh, worrying about the people he left behind in Yunlei. Meanwhile, at the Xuanlong Palace, Muki visited his parents to pay his respect. The queen is delighted to see him. She has been telling him that he should stop going out on expeditions by himself, but he has been disobeying her. The king interrupts the queen and asks Muki about the emperor of Yunlei. The king has heard rumors that the emperor of Yunlei is an extremely beautiful man and wonders if his son was taken with him. Muki tells him not to worry too much. He just has a score to settle with Luo Ange. The king tells him to be careful and asks if he is living with the former emperor of Yunlei. Muki tells him that he locked Ange in the dungeon to make him more obedient, but deep down, he wonders how he is doing. In his head, he refers to Ange as a little kitten. He will surely check on him sooner. The dungeon is illuminated sparsely. Muki walks carefully down the darkened dungeon, thinking to himself that the little kitten, Luo Ange, must be furious. You guessed right. Anyone thrown into the dungeon will be. The guard opens the cell housing the fallen emperor. On the floor, a bowl of rice sits uneaten. The cockroaches littering the floor scuttle around. He asks Ange why he's not eating. Have you seen how dirty the floor is? Who'd have an appetite? Blackmailing Ange. He tells him to think about his family rather than stubbornly starve himself to death. Ange does not even look at him as he tells him that he's not hungry. Annoyed at Ange's childish antics, Muki is about to chastise him when he hears a loud growl. Muki snickers as he finds Ange's antics funny and endearing. Embarrassed, Ange screams at him for laughing at him. He complains that Muki does not want Ange to die but tortures him with terrible food. He screams at the top of his lungs that he'd rather go on a hunger strike and die from starvation. Finding him amusing, Muki admits to his fault and tells Ange that he will make sure that Ange eats the same food as him. Muki pinches Ange's cheek in adoration. Ange then asks if Muki prefers spicy food as Ange prefers food that are light to the stomach. You just said you'd rather die of hunger. So dramatic. But I do find his antics very cute. Muki pinches his cheek harder, telling him not to push his luck. He slaps Muki's hand away and stands proudly. He asks Muki to send someone to clean. He can't live in this dirty place and complains about the bed made of hay. All these are unfit for a human to live in. I think that's the purpose of a dungeon. It is to make humans suffer. I feel like Ange is just so out of touch from the real world. His upbringing seems to have made him like this. Ange complains about the bed, as there's no way he can sleep on it. A cricket scale in the wall sees Ange's open hand and took it as an invitation to land on said hand. Seeing the bug, Ange looks at it dumbly for a second before shaking his hands non-stop and screaming his head off. He runs towards Muki, asking him if he's seen how big it was. Grabbing Ange by the waist, Muki takes out a leaf with his 2 fingers and throws it on the bug. He teasingly tells Ange for being afraid of a bug. Quivering in fear, Ange latches onto him while Muki assures him that the bug has met its demise. Impressed at seeing the bug almost cut in half with a leaf, Ange commends him for being so strong. Bolstered by the compliment, Muki shoves his face closer to Ange and asks him who he's complimenting. Blushing due to their proximity, Ange takes several steps back. Ange tells him that in conclusion, this place is terrible and there's no way he can live there. Muki asks if he deserves to live in a house with a large hall, at least 3 rooms, carpeted floors, and a fireplace for the cold nights. He then asks Ange if he remembers his current status. Yeah, Ange needs a reality check. Seeing that his antics did not work, Ange pouted that he was being mean. Switching strategies, he continues to pout and stares at Muki with his big black eyes. After a few moments of the pout patent pending, Muki calls for servants to listen to his orders. Dozen upon dozens of servants carrying trays of sumptuous food and room decor lines the corridor leading to the dungeons. They cleaned and quickly laid out the carpet and tapestries to make the place cozy. After finally getting everything he asked for, Ange happily munched on his food. Crown Prince Muki joins him at the table and asks him if he is satisfied. Ange puts down his chopsticks and tells Muki that his level of satisfaction is average, and then proceeds to barf. It's like saying, the food was bad after eating all of it. Muki observes that his taste in food is similar to Ange's. Ange tells him that he is full and sleepy. If Muki doesn't want to let him go, then he should leave. Muki places the cup that he has been sipping on the table. He has a question that he needs to ask Ange. He asks Ange if he remembers what happened 3 years ago. Ange racked his brain for any events that transpired 3 years ago, when suddenly he remembers. Ange bows his head as he remembers. Yun State was flooded, making it difficult for his people to find food. Ange painstakingly managed to drain out the flood water to overcome the disaster. This is clearly not what Muki wanted to hear. He slams his hands down on the table and leans towards Ange. He asks if he really does not remember a thing. Is he an amnesiac? Leaning towards Ange menacingly, Muki confirms that Ange has forgotten. Wanting to pacify him, Ange tells him that there are many things he has forgotten, but he remembers that he met Muki once during the Grand Yule ceremony 2 years ago. This upsets Muki, and his eyes darken. Getting up, he tells Ange that he should stay in the dungeons. I don't understand. You clearly want him to be comfortable, but you keep him in the dungeons. Muki leaves the cage and tells the guard to watch over Ange. Ange watches him leave, thinking that the Crown Prince is just weird. He can recall that the only time he met the Crown Prince was at the grand ceremony. Walking back memory lane, Ange remembers it clearly. In the year before last, during the Grand Yule ceremony, fireworks and flying lanterns littered the sky. A younger Ange tries to reach for a lantern stuck on a tree, but being vertically challenged, he is unable to reach it. Someone calls him Xiao Xiao from behind him and pats him on the shoulder when he does not turn. So his nickname is really Xiao Xiao, as Muki just brings up random things to make Ange remember him. When he looks behind him, he finds a boy smiling at him. The boy reprimands him for hiding in the Imperial Garden, which made it difficult to find him. He then invites Ange to have fun with him. He has not returned to Yunla in a long while, and he does not know when he can come back, so he wants to make the most of his time here. Ange pushes his hand and chastises him for addressing him so casually. Surprised at the rejection, Muki grabs Ange by the wrist and asks him if he does not recognize him. Ange smiles, but he looks uncomfortable as he explains that he knows that Muki is the Crown Prince of Yi State. A shadow covers Muki's eyes as he realizes that Ange has forgotten about him. He gives Ange a humorless smile as he calls himself foolish. Back to the present, Ange realizes that Muki has been acting weirdly since then. There's no way that he would have met Muki 3 years ago as he stayed in Yunle. However, Muki acts as if they've known each other years before. Ange presses 2 fingers on his temples to help him think. He also learned from the jailers that they observed a significant change in Crown Prince Muki after attending the Grand Yunle ceremony. All this thinking made Ange's head hurt. He remembers that Muki reacted strongly when he saw that charm with the exquisite dice. It is what prompted him to throw Ange to the dungeon. Upon closer inspection, he finds the character key engraved on the red bean inside the dice. Surprised at this revelation, Ange's jaw drops to the floor. He can't believe it. However, he reasons that it may have been a coincidence, as there are a lot of people that have key as a part of their names. Thinking so hard about it gives him a headache. Out of nowhere, an image of him, happily spending time with a dark-clad man, enters his vision. It came so suddenly that Ange's brain cannot keep up with the image. As a result, he lost consciousness. The jailer, monitoring his every move, panicked and called for the Crown Prince to come quickly. In the Eastern Palace, a servant hands over a bowl of medicine to Muki. Ange stirs from his sleep, complaining about the warmth of the room. Muki quickly sits on his bedside and asks if he is awake. He tells Ange to get up and drink his medicine. When Ange tries to sit up, his dizziness is apparent and Muki scrambles to assist him, presenting Ange with a bowl of putrid-smelling liquid. Ange complains that it seems to be bitter, which amuses Muki. Muki explains that the medicine will lose its potency when sweetened, so Ange has to drink the medicine as it is. He promises Ange that if he drinks the medicine, he will allow him to eat whatever he wants. Staring at the water bowl, Ange took some time to stare at it. Muki coaxes him to drink it, even promising that he will drink it himself if he does. That is such a sweet gesture, but unnecessary. Ange is surprised that Muki would even suggest it. The doctor cautions Muki to not do it, as the drug is toxic and could have a side effect. Don't just take medicine willy-nilly. Undeterred, Muki tried again to coax Ange. Ange hesitates and asks Muki why would he do that for Ange when he's not sick. Muki replies that he just wants to do it for Ange and even offers to administer it mouth to mouth. Frightened that Muki would go through with his offer, Ange quickly grabs the bowl of medicine and downs it bottoms up. He hands the bowl back to Muki after finishing it and laments on how badly it tastes. It felt like part of his soul had died. Muki prepared a bowl of porridge for Anga in exchange of candied fruits to wash away the taste of bitter medicine. Anga gratefully accepts the bowl. He takes a sip of the porridge, and as Muki asks him about the taste, Anga spat out a mouthful of the porridge, embarrassed by his unsightly reaction. Anga explains that he did not mean to vomit the porridge, but it tasted so bad. The rice was not cooked thoroughly. Each word stabs Muki to the heart, making him depressed. The doctor chastises Anga and reveals that the crown prince cooked the porridge himself. Muki tells him to stop talking, and the doctor quickly apologizes. Anga asks if he put any pricey ingredients in the porridge and points out that he should not be blamed as the cook prepared it badly. The one who cooked it should take the blame. He raises the blanket to his chest, while wondering if Muki really prepared the food for him. Reining his anger in, Muki shouted for all of them to shut up and pressed his hand down on Anga's head, ordering him to sleep. Anga quickly lay flat on the bed out of fear. He grabs Muki's robes and thanked him sweetly for his kindness. The hour passes by and Muki stayed with Anga to watch him sleep. Anga sleeps with his hand tightly wrapped around the edge of Muki's robe. Muki realizes that it is the first time that Anga willingly touched him. If it were up to him, he wants to feel Anga's skin. Leaning down, he thinks to himself that if Anga does not protest, he shall take his silence as a yes. Nope, don't do that. There's a thing called consent. When morning came, light shines on the couple sleeping on the bed. When Anga opens his eyes, he is met by the sight of a slumbering Muki, but the other must have been faking it. Muki gathers him close, greeting him a good morning. Anga shoots up quickly, but stumbles back and almost falls off the raised platform. Luckily, Muki quickly grabs him and they tumble on the bed. Sitting atop Muki, Angu is too flustered that he cannot complete a sentence. Muki understands what he must be thinking and explains that Anga had a high fever last night and won't wake up. It's the trope when the ML shares his body heat with the other ML to keep his temperature down. Muki reaches for Anga's forehead to check his temperature and is relieved that his temperature is back to normal. He tells Anga to rest and bundle up, pushing him down on the bed. Not satisfied with the explanation, Anga slaps his hand and calls Muki a dirty dog for taking advantage of him while he's sick. Muki defended himself by explaining that he had no choice as Anga slept on his bed with dirty clothes. Anga accuses him of popping his cherry. Realizing that Anga seems to not know the difference between sleeping together and actually doing it, Muki clarifies if Anga ever took any concubines to bed. Scandalized, Anga answers that he is too young at 20 years of age and has been sickly. Unlike Muki, he had no time for casual dalliances. Muki cages him with his body to Anga's horror, screaming at Muki, asking him what he's doing. Muki leans in closer and just stares at Anga with a mysterious look in his eyes. After a while, he lets out a relieved sigh. Anga feels his breath on his forehead and he quickly covers it in embarrassment. After a while, Muki plays with Anga's hair, admitting that he is elated to hear that Anga never took a concubine in the past. He assures Anga that he did not touch him that way last night. Kissing Anga's hair, Muki explains that their current situation is all due to Anga's fever, and he will liken himself to a beast if he took advantage of a sleeping Anga. Blushing like a maiden, Anga stammers while Muki turns his predatory grin at him, delighted that Anga is now feeling better. He fears to do something fun with Anga, promising to satisfy him. Blushing like a bride on her wedding night, Anga draws his clothes closer to his chest and screams at Muki for being so shameless. It is then that Anga considers that Muki is probably not as bad as he thinks, as the man seems to be genuinely worried about him. Getting up, Muki rubs Anga's head, encouraging him to eat his fill now that he is better. Anga only ate the horribly prepared porridge, and he must be famished. About to stand up, Anga took a moment to plan his actions. As Muki has been quick to change his mood, the crown prince might throw him in the dungeon once he recovers. Fearing that he might sleep with the bugs again, Anga decides to pretend that he is still sick. He pretends that he is so unwell and is unable to leave the bed. Seeing through his antics, Muki threatens to hug him again if he feels as bad as he says. Miraculously, Anga jumps off the bed announcing that he is all better, but he overdid it and is consumed by a coughing fit. Muki pours him a glass of water and hands it over to him to help with his cough. Muki tells Anga that he does not need to feign illness. He promises to not send him back to the dungeons and will allow him to live here. Anga smiles at him refreshingly and thanks him for his kindness. Drinking the glass of water, he asks where they are, to which Muki readily answers that they are in his bedroom. The answer made Ange choke on his drink. Every time he thanks this guy, there's always something that would make him decide to take it back. Ange wipes off the residual water from his chin and tells Muki that he might prefer to return to the dungeons. Muki looks at him amusedly and commends him for even trying to escape. Staying in the room, Ange contemplates what Muki is up to. He is locked up in Muki's bedroom, yet Muki has been acting like a real gentleman. His musings are interrupted by a female servant who brings him a bowl of medicine. Ange pinches his nose to avoid smelling the bitter scent of the medicine and tells the servant that he will drink it at a later time. The servant looks at him beseechingly, explaining that the crown prince ordered her to make sure that Ange drinks the bowl of medicine. Giving in, Ange realizes that he has no choice as the servant will get in trouble if he refuses. The servant sweetly tells him that the crown prince is only worried about him. She explains that the crown prince was so worried when Ange got sick and commissioned the best physician the palace can offer. He even stayed to watch over Ange to make him feel better. Ange can't fathom why Muki would spend too much time on him. The servant tells him that the crown prince has never shown this much affection for anyone else. Ange contemplates on her words. Although Muki sent him to the dungeons, he has yet to force him to do anything he does not want. He also takes good care of him. The servant exclaims in shock, which Ange took as her trying to bring him back from his musings. He coughs and tells the maid that he observes that those working for the crown prince only have good words for him. The maid seems to be uncomfortable as she warns him to be careful with his words. Ange brushes off her worries, thinking that she is only being shy and restrained. He compares the women in Yi State with the women from Yunle. Before he can finish his sentence, a cold voice asks him how he would describe women from Yunle, surprised by Muki's sudden appearance. Ange can only giggle uncomfortably, while the maid excuses herself abruptly. Muki accuses him of flirting with the maids, which Ange vehemently denies. When he is about to admit that they were talking about Muki, he stops himself. Muki repeats what he heard from Ange's chat with the maid and adds words to make the talk seem salacious. Ange realizes that should Muki figure out that he was who they were talking about, he will surely make fun of Ange. Ange sits back down while he pouts. He explains that he was just pointing out the difference between Yi and Yunle women. The Yi women are shy while the Yunle women are bold and generous. Muki lets out a disapproving click of the tongue. He places his hand on the back of Ange's chair and teases him for understanding women when he is inexperienced. Ange defended himself by saying that he met as many women as Muki have. He then places his hand on Ange's shoulder and teases him that he never knew that Ange prefers the bold and generous type. He then tells Ange that the women from Yunle can't be as bold as the men from Yi State, clearly trying to get Ange to pick him over the Yunle women. Playing with Ange's lips, Muki marvels at the other man's tempting allure. Ange turns away from him and announces that he is not into men, and men should not act like women. Muki comments on how energetic Ange has been and tells Ange that he shall join him in the library of the Eastern Palace and be his sub-director. Ange turns to him in interest. He crosses his arms and legs. As a man from Yunle, he shall not work without adequate pay and at least a proper home to stay in. This guy knows his worth. Muki explains that a disaster has befallen Yunle. In order to help the people of Yunle, Muki proposed to allocate 300,000 taels of silver to send aid to Yunle. The money was awarded to Muki, but its use is up to him. He plays with Ange's hair and taunts him that 300,000 taels is an amount he can never pay off even if he works for Muki. Muki turns to him and latches on to Muki's offer. He clarifies if Muki intends to use the 300,000 taels of silver to send aid to the people affected by the disaster. Muki tells him that Ange can start working tomorrow. Ange bows down but quickly looks up at Muki. He readily agrees to work for him. Leaning down, Muki tells Ange that he wants more than thanks from him. Ange looks up while Muki leans down. Ange made sure to lay out his boundaries and tells Muki that he shall not serve him with his body. Muki is surprised to hear him say this. He asks Ange if he thinks that Muki is only keeping him around for his body. Letting go of Muki, Ange tells Muki that he trusts that he is a benevolent person and would never resort to dirty tricks and force anyone. As a former monarch, his prideful bringing will never submit to Muki's whims. Muki crosses his arms and asks Ange if he is challenging him. Ange appreciates the help the Muki is offering, but he would like to be clear on what he's willing to do so that he does not accidentally cheat on Muki. Angered at Ange's reluctance, Muki shouts at him. He tells Ange that if being a pet, I think by pet, he wants Ange to be his lover, is one he's unwilling to do. that he should act like a real slave. His work would include serving Muki drinks, helping him bathe and get dressed. Ange accepts these tasks. He'd rather waste away in hard labor rather than use his body. Angered that he did not get his way, Muki walks out sulking that Luo Ange would rather be a slave than his lover. Ange is grateful that Muki lets him have his way. He wonders if the man really cares for him. The day after, the two shares a bed with Ange hobbing most of the bed. Muki is forced to occupy a small part of the bed. Muki wakes up first and asks Ange to help him get dressed. The master has to wake up the servant. He shakes Ange's shoulder to wake him up but got kicked on the chest for his attempts. He falls to the floor with a hiss. Ange turns over in his sleep and snuggles under the sheets. Annoyed that this is not how it is supposed to be, Muki screams at Ange to wake up. Grabbing Ange by his collar, he shakes him awake until Ange finally yawns, signaling that he's about to get moving. Ange greets him a good morning. Muki tells him that he should help him get dressed and that he should not slack off. Ange happily obliges and helps him put the trousers on his head. This actually made me laugh. Realizing that this is going nowhere, Muki is about to scream at him, but he realizes that Ange is still half asleep. Ange falls on him and rubs his cheek on his shoulder. The quiet snoring, an indication that Ange has fallen back to sleep. Muki can't resist wrapping his arm around Ange. Muki savors this moment as this is the only chance he has to hug Ange without him protesting. After the morning court, Muki debated and consulted with the scholars. He finally makes his way home and is greeted by the maids. The first person he looks for is Luo Ange. The maids tell him that Ange is in the study, reviewing the memorials for Muki. At least, he's taking his new job seriously. Delighted that Ange is eager to work for him, Muki went straight to the study to see Ange. He expected Ange to throw a tantrum after being given this job. He never expected him to be so willing and cooperative. Reading over Ange's shoulder, he realizes that the former emperor is not all studying. I'm literally cringing that seeing him raw over an ancient book. Seeing the doodles over such precious books makes Muki hiss. He calls Ange by his pet name, Xiao Xiao. Instead of heeding his call, Ange insisted to finish his drawing first. He did not gain a servant, he gained a child to look after. Ange seems to be more trouble than his worth. Annoyed at the other's antics, Muki asks him why he had to draw on Muki's books when there are perfectly clean sheets of paper in his cabinet. Instead of cowing in fear, Ange just looks back to wink at him. He decides that the books are boring and tries to spice things up with his chilling doodles. Ange grips the brush tightly, now that he is a prisoner and has caused his ancestors shame. Ange cannot sink deeper and work for the enemy who conquered his country, so he's being deliberately annoying and destructive. Expecting Ange to throw a fuss, Muki places his hand down on the doodles and tells Ange that he does not mind making things more fun for Ange. Looks like he has something up his sleeve. He tells Ange that if Ange finds something fun, then Muki will give it a try and play his games. Ange tries to discourage him to do the fun things he mentioned in the daytime. Muki lifts up the book that Ange has been doodling on. Looking at the horrible doodles, Muki pitches his ear and tells him to not do it again. Otherwise, he would feed him to the wolves. Rubbing his ears, Ange looks every bit like a chastised child. Muki clenches his fist. He knows that Ange is deliberately making him angry so that he would order his demise. He asks Ange where he got the idea that the last monarch should die for the sake of his country. Ange freezes in place as he remembers a person calling him by his name, Xiaozhen. Before he ascended the throne, the person tells him that he will become a wise emperor whose name will be legend in the history books. This person's name is Lu Zi. Ange tells the person that instead of being a wise emperor, he wants to leave a good name in the history books. All Ange wants is to protect his people, keeping them safe from war and for everyone to live a comfortable life. His reign is short as Muki led his soldiers to Yi State's gate to conquer them. The person, Lu Zi, offered his life in place of Ange should they be defeated. Ange feels guilty that he was not able to fulfill his duty. Ultimately, he did not get the chance to lay his life for his country. Muki thinks that there are holes in Ange's story and suspects that the former emperor does not trust him and is reluctant to tell him everything. Muki dips his brush in the ink. Ange offers to grind the ink stick for him. If I'm Muki, I'll make sure you don't touch my things. Muki grabs his face and proceeds to draw on Ange's beautiful face. When he's done, he tells Ange that he drew a tortoise on his face, but in reality, he drew two lovebirds. Ange is annoyed that Muki is able to get back at him, and he is powerless to fight back. You kinda deserve that one. Muki tells him to wash his face using the basin and return to grind the ink for him. throwing a tantrum and miffed that Muki bested him at being annoying. Ange avoids Muki's stare and stomps off to follow Muki's orders. He realized that rumors of Muki being vengeful are true. After washing his face on the basin, Ange takes a peek at Muki, impressed at the other's diligence. Surely Muki will be a wise emperor when he ascends the throne. But Ange also thinks that he'll be very moody too. Muki turns to him and accuses him of poofing off. Grudgingly, Ange walks over to him, denying the accusation. He obediently grinds the ink, which made Muki suspicious. It's unusual for Ange to be so obedient. He must be planning something. Ange looks at him with a forced smile and tells him about an old saying that one must take his duty seriously. As the Crown Prince's sub-director, it is his duty to do his job well. Indeed, Ange has tricks up his sleeves. He plans to splash the ink on the memorial so that Muki will no longer order him to grind ink. You're playing with fire there. About to put his plan into action, Ange leans down, but before he can do any damage, he catches a glimpse of the memoir and sees that it is about Yunle. The request is to raise the taxes for the residents of Yunle, but the Crown Prince denies the request as Yunle has just suffered from a devastating defeat. It also puts a stop for further requests on raising the taxes for Yunle. Touched that Muki is really putting in some effort to help Yunle, Ange realizes that Muki did not lie to him. Ange pulls back, aborting his plan to sabotage Muki's work, but his sleeve catches on a cup of water, which spills on the memoirs. The two stares at the ruined papers, until Muki rounds on Ange in anger. Ange sweat profusely, trying to make Muki believe that all this is an accident. Muki snaps his brush in two, keeping his calm. There's no way in that this is all an accident, as Ange has deliberately shown defiance. Maybe it's time to teach him a lesson by accidentally fixing him. Ange denies any blame and insists that he did not do it on purpose this time. Muki pulls Ange towards him and pushes him down on the desk. Unexpectedly, Ange feels a smack on his bottom. Muki chastises him for being troublesome. Ange came out honestly and tells Muki that he did not need to grind the ink stick for Muki. He insists that Muki let him go. Muki only continued to spank him. A die of embarrassment. Finally learning his lesson, Ange turns to Muki, his eyes in tears. He tells Muki that it hurts. Stunned by how pitiful Ange looks, Muki stops punishing him and tells Ange that he owes him now. Ange swears at him that he did not intend to ruin the memorials. Taking pity at him, Muki touches Ange's face and tells him to stop making trouble. He tells Ange that he will allow him to draw more tortoises if he feels wronged. He tells Ange that the memorials are important and he must review them immediately. He will have someone write the memorials, and tells Ange to stay in one place and behave. Ange feels guilty for making things more difficult for Muki. The man is always nice to him, even when he does things to annoy him deliberately. In the Eastern Palace garden, Ange takes some time to study the dice. Muki is not the type to lie. The Crown Prince has been hinting on something that happened in the past. There's also the matter of Muki's name carved on the dice. What could have happened between the two of them? How could he not remember? Dangling his feet on the pond, Ange tries to remember what transpired 3 years ago. He remembers getting sick, but his memory of the time is hazy. Trying to remember this point of his life gives him a headache. The charm with the exquisite dice slips off his grasp and sinks on the pond. The servants walk over to Ange and asks if he is okay. They encourage him to get some rest, as the Crown Prince specifically ordered them to be mindful of Ange's health. Ange accepts their help. He concludes that regardless of the past, he must treat Muki more favorably, as the man has been kind to him and has provided valuable help to the Yunle people. As he walks away, the charm sinks to the bottom of the pond. Ange puts down his brush. Writing the memoirs could be taxing on the body, so he stretches his limbs to relieve his joints. He rewrites the memoirs that got ruined. The door opens, and in walks Muki. He calls his full name angrily. Ange asks him what Muki is doing in the study at this time of night. He commends him for being such a diligent student, and tells him that the Yi State is lucky to have him as a future monarch. What upsets Muki is the charm in his hand. Surprised that Muki has it, Ange checks his body for the charm and realizes that he must have dropped it. He asks Muki why he has the charm. Muki asks if Ange has dropped it, as he questions him if he threw it to the pond. Ange insists that he dropped the charm and asks Muki if he came all this way just to confront him. Muki asks if Ange hates him so much. Ange asks what he means. He asks why it would matter to Muki if he keeps or throws away the dice. The dice is Ange's after all. You're digging yourself a grave there. Muki raises his hand in anger but stops at seeing Ange flinch. Muki caresses Ange's hair thinking that Ange truly believes that he would hurt him. Releasing him, Muki turns his back on him. Ange tries to call him but Muki just shouts at him to get out of his sight. Annoyed at being rejected, Ange shouts back at Muki that he will surely leave. He does not want to be with Muki anyway. Muki looks back at Ange and tries to call him but Ange is visibly upset and walks away. With his hand empty, Muki bows his head thinking that Ange never wants to be with him. Ange sneaks out of the Eastern Palace, but being a foreigner, he has nowhere to go in the East State. Ange sits against the palace wall, curls up his legs and hugs them closer to himself. It's hard to live in someone else's home. He feels like a toothless tiger, humiliated and eager to regain his freedom. A eunuch patrols around the walls, yawning as he passes by Ange. A sudden movement alerts that eunuch and is surprised that Ange sits on the ground against the wall. He asks why Ange would sleep outside. In a panic, he tells Ange to get out of the cold and go home. Ange just tells the eunuch to let him sleep. The eunuch offers to take him to the wing room to get some rest. It is still a few hours before the sun rises. Ange thanks the eunuch. You don't really have a choice. The next day, Muki looks for Ange. The eunuch tells him that Ange is in the wing room, sleeping. He lets out a sigh, thinking that Ange could fall asleep anytime, anywhere. Opening the memoirs, he recognizes Ange's handwriting and realizes that Ange read the memorials for him and provided his insights and advice. He feels bad for being mean to Ange when he was really making an attempt to help him. Muki brushes his hair off his face. He knows that Ange's temper is short. He's worried that Ange must still be angry. The eunuch tells Muki that the fourth prince invited him to go hunting. Muki decides to accept the invitation and sees this as an opportunity to take Ange out. Ange will hopefully forgive him. He tells the eunuch to send word to the fourth prince. The eunuch readily obeys. Walking towards the wing room, Muki invites Ange to go out but stops himself at seeing him fast asleep. He looks at Ange and is miffed that the other man is able to sleep so well when he spent the night tossing and turning in his bed. He wakes him up, but this time, Ange opens one bleary eye and asks him what he wants. Muki asks Ange why he looks terrible and wonders if he caught a cold again. Ange smacks his hand away and tells him not to bother. He tells Muki that he had a good sleep since there's no one fussing around him. Muki clenches his fist and instead of asking, he orders Ange to go hunting with him. Ange refuses, but it fell on deaf ears. Muki orders him to get ready in 15 minutes. After Muki left, Ange puts his hand in his head, realizing that he did indeed catch a cold. He rubs his aching head and wonders what made the Muki angry. You did. The carriage arrives at a forest, and Muki helps Ange to get down his course. The fourth prince approaches them happy that his eldest brother came. He asks Muki why he is not dressed for hunting. Muki tells him that he only came for the view and does not intend to hunt. The fourth prince is upset to hear this. Their second brother brought praise specifically for this occasion. He was looking forward to admire their crown prince's talent in archery. Muki wonders why they decided to hunt during the winter. The gates open, but the ones that came out are not beasts, but humans. Women with their hands tied to their front. Luo Ange realizes that these people are slaves. He confronts the fourth prince, asking what they are doing. Nonchalantly, the fourth prince tells him that they are merely hunting. Why do things escalate too quickly on this manhwa? I thought they would just have a cutesy hunting session. The fourth prince asks his brother if Ange is his new footboy and comments that Ange has no manners. Angry at the turn of events, Muki looks at his fourth brother menacingly. It seems that he is unaware that this is their kind of hunting. Horrified, Ange can't believe that what they call hunting is killing people. The fourth prince defended himself by saying that these prey are not from the East City. These are some of the poor people from Yunlin, and it will be no big deal to hunt them. Ange sheds a tear upon hearing that these people are from Yunlin. He charges towards the fourth prince, but a soldier stops him. The fourth prince looks down at him, daring him to go against the royalty from Yi country. Ange turns to Muki, spitefully asking if this is what he wanted to show him. He believes that his disobedience has caused this. Muki tries to reach out to him, his face full of regret. In anger, Ange charges towards Muki and bites him on the neck. Muki hisses in pain. He orders the guard to stay put. He pushes Ange off him, but still at arm's length. He pushes him against the carriage, reprimanding him for fighting him over a bunch of slaves. He challenges Ange if he wants to kill him, to which the other angrily barks to be let go. Muki threatens him to behave, otherwise He will strip him off his clothes and show him off to everyone. Betrayed. Ange can only cry. He wonders why Muki would do this to him. Muki caresses his face, attempting to explain that he only intended to take Ange out. While the two were having a talk, a slave runs off, but the fourth prince is able to catch him with his arrows. Ange stares at the traumatic sight. The fourth prince turns to his older brother and comments that the prince's footboy is ill-mannered. Thinking that this is all his fault, Ange staggers back and begs Muki to be mad at him instead of the slaves. He does not understand why Muki hates him so much, nor would he want to know. He kneels on the ground, telling Muki that whatever it is that he did, he has already forgotten about it. He blames Muki for ruining his life. He begs for Muki to either end him or release him. Muki is powerful enough to get whatever he wants. So what does he want from Ange? At the sight of the despairing Ange, Muki asks if he really thinks that his sole purpose is to ruin his life or bully him. Muki realizes that Ange has no feelings for him and has been holding on to the past. He tells Ange that if he wants to save the slaves, then he must show off his archery skills. A maid hands over Muki's bow, giving Ange the choice to shoot one of the slaves to save the others. That's mental torture. Man. Muki drops the bow in front of Ange. Ange is scared to touch the bow. There's no way that he can do that to his people. Muki watched his sad face. He wants Ange to feel the pain he's feeling now, and asks Ange if he has ever thought of Muki. He tells Ange that this marks the day that Ange must make a choice. Either he shoots one of them or watch all the slaves drop to the ground one at a time. He urges Ange to decide faster, as every moment counts. The more he delays, the more will suffer. Ange picks up the bow, asking himself why this has to happen to him. Luo Ange makes a decision. Instead of allowing the crown prince to control him, he shall point his arrow towards his enemies. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Ange steps on a stone to steady himself. With quivering hands,